Hey guys, Lindsay from Saddle Up here. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever sat in a few different saddles that are technically the same seat size, but you feel different in them, meaning they fit differently? Well, that is a very common thing that we run into. I've used this analogy a lot, but just like jean sizes or different clothing brands, even though saddles are the same seat size, they oftentimes can fit differently in the seat. So I'm going to be going over why that is and the key things to look for to make sure you're getting the right size seat. Okay, so I'm going to be showing a couple different saddles and the seat sizes that I technically ride in, but I'm going to explain where the differences come in that might make that seat size and that specific saddle feel different than the other one. So this is a Circle Y High Horse. This is a Galaxy barrel saddle. This is exactly what I ride in. This is a 14.5-inch finished seat, but there are key things that play into how the actual seat will feel once you're sitting in it, regardless of what the measurement is. So obviously we have our regular, we've gone over how to measure our seat size, finished seat size, also the tree size, which is back to this stitching. So while that is the indicator of what technically the size seat is, again, there's many factors that go into how that is actually going to sit and where the inconsistencies might come into from a 14.5 of this saddle to a 14.5 in a total different one. So one key thing as well, we've talked about how your cantle is and the seat pocket. That can definitely affect how that seat size feels. A lot of times, if they have a super high cantle or it even comes out a little more kind of right here to give you that better pocket. Also, if this is higher, meaning if we have a pencil roll versus the Cheyenne roll, which is this, the Cheyenne roll is going to be nice, flat, and open as your pencil roll. This would actually be rolled up, and it definitely creates kind of that higher back and deeper seat pocket. So stuff like that can absolutely make that seat size feel different because we are definitely almost shrinking this or making it more secure in here. So that can make it feel a little different than one size to the next. Another thing is the pommel height. We have a lot of saddles, specifically barrel saddles, that they are making these swells or pommel really high. That can definitely kind of eliminate a lot of thigh room because thigh room and the width right here, that is going to be huge when it comes to seat sizes. And not a lot of saddle makers go off of that. That's technically not even a measurement that is given with these saddles. But this is actually a big piece to making sure that that seat size is going to fit you nicely. So we will talk about this thigh width here in just a second, but the swell and the cantle can definitely have a play in when those seat sizes feel different, even though technically they're the same on the tag and everything. So when you have a super high, tall swell, that can kind of make this shrink or give that shrink appeal when you're sitting in it and make it feel a little different than one that's maybe a little lower, a little more open. A lot of these different barrel saddles specifically have different swell shapes, which we've kind of gone over. They have kind of that old bear trap style, which these technically actually point inward and kind of cup your legs. Those can kind of give you a snugger seat feel, even though the seat size technically is the same as others. And then, of course, the cantle being if it has a much higher cantle, if it comes out a little more to provide that better seat pocket, or depending on what this material is, if it is that pencil roll, then oftentimes that can kind of give that illusion or that feeling that it's a little smaller. Something too that changes a lot on how the seat size feels is what the actual seat material is. So oftentimes when you have a super padded memory foam type seat in these, that can definitely give that feeling that the seat size is smaller than what it actually is because there's so much material in here that you're now kind of being pushed forward, if that makes sense. So this compared to a saddle that's a hard seat with no material in it could definitely feel different even if they're the same size seat because this we have quite a bit of padding, whereas if we didn't, it kind of lessens that feeling in this seat here. Okay, so now the thigh width. This is a big one, and again, this isn't really even considered a measurement or any details that really anyone advertises or even talks about, but it is a big thing, and we'll get a lot of people out of state asking us, hey, what's the thigh width on this saddle so that I know if it's going to fit or not. So what I'm meaning by that is the room from here to here. So where your thigh is going to sit here on the seat jockey. And you would be surprised how different this measurement can be saddle to saddle, even though they're technically the same seat size. And a lot of it, again, does boil down to your swell, your cantle, and just how this was overall built. So a good way to measure this is you go from right there at your swell to kind of the back point of this cantle. So exactly where your thigh is going to sit. And that can be very different saddle to saddle, again, even if it's the same seat size. So I'm going to sit in a couple and we are going to demonstrate. Just for reference, this one's about 11 inches on the thigh room. Okay, so as I said, this is exactly what I ride in. Same seat size, same style, everything. I pretty traditionally ride in a 14.5, but sometimes a 14, just again, depending on the cantle, swell, and the thigh room here, as well as the padding is a big thing for me because some of these saddles are so padded, it can really give that feeling that you just shrunk the saddle to seat sizes because there's so much material. It's like a barrier in between you and the actual seat. So that can be huge too, depending on what this material in the seat is. It can change the feel entirely regardless of what the tag says. So I'm gonna go ahead and sit in this. Okay, so this is how I am sitting in this saddle here. I got about my 2 fingers between my thigh and the swell here. I prefer to have a little less room, but this is fine. Like, I'm very comfortable in my saddles when I'm riding in the seat size. So just for instance, we do have more of the Cheyenne roll, so it's a little more open. However, this saddle does have a pretty high cantle. It does kind of come out a little more to support and give a better seat pocket. We do have that padding in the seat, but it's not anything over padded or super crazy there, but definitely something to just keep in mind. So this is how this as a 14.5 is going to sit me. Again, we were looking at about 11 inches for the thigh room. Let's take a look at a different one. Okay, so here's our next example. This is another Circle Y, completely different model. This is again another 14.5 finished seat, so technically the same seat size as the one that I ride in. However, I'm not sure if you can tell, but we definitely have changed some things as far as the design goes. This is a hard seat, so no material. It's just a rough out hard seat here. While we don't have a pencil roll, this is still a Cheyenne roll. It is much higher and definitely has a lot more on the sides here to give kind of that deeper seat. This is one of Circle Y's newer designs, so they do have a much higher cantle and deeper seat pocket, as well as they're very known for their much higher and taller swell and horn. So when I'm looking at this and doing the thigh measurement, we're at about 9.5 compared to the other one that I usually ride in is an 11 almost. So let's take a look at how I sit in this one, even though it's the same seat size. Okay, so now I am sitting in this saddle. Again, same exact seat size as the other one and what I ride in every single day. However, the design features are very much different. It's the same brand even, it is a Circle Y, but it's a completely different model. The design features are pretty significantly different. We have our super high, tall swell here, and then we have a super high cantle that has a lot of support and kind of comes down and hugs right here to give you that bigger seat pocket. We do have a hard seat as well, but as you can see in my other one, I had about 2 fingers between my thigh and the swell. In this one, I am touching the swell. So, and it's very comfortable. Again, we've talked about seat sizes. It's very preference based. We can give you that rough estimate, like 1 to 2 fingers between your thigh and the swell, but ultimately it's how you feel comfortable. So this is a doable, like if I'm sitting kind of and have my legs in the right position, I have about 1 finger. But what a drastic difference, even though technically same brand and same seat size, but we definitely shrunk right here in the thigh room because of the dramatic swell and dramatic cantle. And like I said, we definitely lost a lot here. The other one was almost 11 inches and this one's like 9.5. So that is going to be our first example. Maybe let's look at a couple other ones. Okay, for our next option, I got a different brand. So this is a Laredo barrel saddle and I got a smaller seat. So this is actually a 14-inch finish seat. The others have been 14.5. So looking at this saddle right now, we can definitely see it has a more subtle swell, definitely not as tall or as wide. So a little bit lower, a little bit smaller, not as drastic in the front end. We have kind of your traditional barrel saddle cantle. It is higher, but it's not dramatic or drastic in any way, and it doesn't kick out a lot right here for that extra seat pocket. So when I am measuring it, and again, this is a 14-inch seat, I'm kind of in between the two actually. We're right at 10 inches here for the thigh room, so kind of in between the two 14.5s. Let me take a sit in it and we will see how it looks. Okay, so now that I am sitting in this one, and again, this is a 14-inch finished seat. However, it's a different brand, different design, and it definitely has a little more thigh room even than the 14.5 that I just sat in. I am back to my 2 fingers technically. So that is what I'm talking about, that thigh room and how that saddle is designed does have a lot to do with how that seat size sits, even though it says something exact on the tag. So that's just something to keep an eye on, because I just went down in a seat size and I have technically the same room that I do in my 14 and a half that I ride in all the time. But this 14 actually fits me very nicely and is very comfortable because, again, we have that almost same thigh room. We have a more subtle swell and a more subtle cantle, so that definitely changes things regardless of what the tag says. Okay, so here is another example. This is, again, a different brand, different seat size. This is a Scott Thomas barrel saddle, and it is actually a 13 and a half finish seat. We do have a little bit of a more built up swell, but again, not as much so as that one Circle Y. We do have the Cheyenne roll and a little bit of a shorter cantle actually, but the seat does have kind of a lip in the padding, so it provides kind of that deeper seat pocket. It is pretty padded, but not overly padded in the seat. Let's take a look at our thigh room here. So we're at about almost an 11 in this one actually, if you can believe it, with that being a 13 and a half finish seat. So let me sit in it. Okay, so now we have gone down basically an inch in seat size for me. I normally ride in a 14 and a half. This is a 13 and a half finish seat. And I still have my 2 fingers that I do in my 14 and a half. It's really crazy actually if you think about it. But again, it really boils down to just the structural design of the saddle, and a lot of it is that thigh room here. Even though it's a 13 and a half seat, I technically sit in it just fine and pretty much alike my 14 and a half that I ride daily. Okay, so that was our video on key components that can make identical seat sizes, whether they're in the same brand or different brands, fit or sit differently. So again, swell, cantle, and that thigh room really come into play when you are sitting in saddles. If you sit in 2 identical saddles and they feel differently to you, that is okay. It is actually very normal. I compare it all the time, but it's just like ladies' jeans shoppings. If you know, you know. It's a bear to do, and no brand is alike. Every style fits a little bit different. Same with these saddles. So what the tag says, even if they're the exact same, sometimes they might sit or fit you a little bit differently, and that's okay. I hope this was beneficial. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or video ideas, leave them down below. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.